Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear friends, students of the third year, Cairo Higher Institute's English Division, it's my pleasure to welcome you to another drama lecture. First of all, I hope that you are all fine and that you are enjoying good health. Till now, we have read and analyzed a number of extracts from William Congreve's The Way of the World. In Act 1, we were introduced to the two characters of Mirabel and Mr. Fainall, and we came to know through their dialogue about 2 or 3 other characters, mainly Lady Wishford, Millamant, and Mrs. Marwood. In Act 2, we met, mainly speaking, Mrs. Marwood and Mrs. Fainall, and through their dialogue, we came to know about their superficial friendship as well as each character's true feelings towards Mirabel. And they commented on Mirabel in many aspects. In the proviso scene, later on, we came to know about Mirabel and Millamant as true lovers. And then we moved to talk about Mirabel, the main character who appears as a hero by the end of the play and manages to rescue Lady Wishford's reputation through stopping Mr. Fainall blackmailing her. As you have noticed, Mr. Mirabel is the link that connects all my previous examples. So today, inshallah, we are going to shed some light on Mirabel's character. If you remember, a character means a person in drama. And by characterization, we need to understand that it is how the dramatist portrays his character. Our focus today, inshallah, is the character of Mirabel. Throughout the play, we have Mirabel, the lover, or in particular, the restoration lover, the young gentleman who is handsome and attractive to women. Before the play starts, Mirabel had an affair with Arabella, Lady Wishford's daughter, and he loved later on Millamant, her cousin. At the same time, being handsome is the main cause beyond Mrs. Marwood's expression that she likes him. It is the same verb, likes, which Mr. Congreve presented in his dramatis personae at the early beginning of the play, even before Act 1 starts. Mirabel is a lover. Mirabel is a man who chases his true love. And by true love, I mean his love to Millamant. Throughout the play, we have a number of aspects which characterize Mirabel as a lover. So as to start with, after having a relationship with Arabella, he doesn't retreat and think that he must get rid of her or end his relationship with her in a very vulgar way. On the contrary, as a gentleman, he arranges for her a marriage. For him, he doesn't neglect her. For him, he has still some passions towards her, but she cannot be his true lover. If you have noticed that Mirabel also pretended loving Lady Wishford so as to be close to Millamant, his true beloved, or the young gentle lady he really loves. In this case, his pretense was just a step towards his true love. Once again, when he awaited Mr. Fennell's getting married to Arabella, he didn't trust him too much. And at the same time, he was trying to convince himself before anybody else that he is a gentleman. That's why he accepts Arabella's fortune in trust in order to save her from a future husband who at a certain moment can be out of mood or can be dangerous because one circumstance, because one cause or another. Actually, Mirabel appears as a lover who enjoys his love, who enjoys playing the love game, especially with Millamant, and at the same time, he is a person who understands love and marriage as two important themes of the Restoration drama. In addition to Mirabel, the lover, we have two other aspects or characteristics associated with the character of Mirabel. Mr. Congreve dramatizes Mirabel as cynical. And the word cynical here has two levels of meaning. Cynical means somehow ironical or sarcastic. He pokes fun at the hypocrisy of society. And at the same time, it can be a sense that not all people are sincere because they seek their own advantage. If we are going to apply the two interpretations, they are represented in the way of the world. Mirabel is ironical or sarcastic in the sense that, again, he pokes fun at the hypocrisy of the Restoration society. In this case, it's better to be reminded that in Act 1, he had a very long dialogue with Mr. Fennell. In this dialogue, he talked about the possibility that the Parliament will issue an act to prohibit the exportation of foods. On another occasion, he describes Lady Wishford as an evil genius. The two examples show you how Mirabel is sarcastic, how Mirabel pokes fun at the hypocrisy of society. Of course, he has some tension with Lady Wishford after she had discovered that he pretended loving her just to be close to Millamant. At the same time, he is not welcomed by her during her couple night, the night before the start of the play. When Mirabel was introduced, her accompaniment went into silence, and they praised that visits shouldn't be too long. In other words, Mrs. Fennell expresses this later on in the play. Lady Wishford didn't accept Mirabel as a friend at that particular moment. But for the time being, he recognized that he is not welcomed. If you have a look at Mirabel the cynical, you will find that he deals with Mr. Fennel with wit. For him, he pokes fun at the superficiality of Mr. Fennel's appearance. Again, Mr. Fennel, the husband, the experienced gentleman, from Mirabel's point of view, is not enjoying the dignity or the honor he assumes himself, he gives to himself. And this leads to the second interpretation, that for him people appear to be sincere, but in reality they are not enjoying that kind of sincerity. When Mirabel is introduced, we come to know that he has already managed to arrange Waitwell's marriage to Fievel. His servant got married to Lady Wishford's maid to achieve two purposes. The first purpose is that Mirabel may have a friend in Lady Wishford's camp, in Lady Wishford's house. The second one is that he is going to use Waitwell in his plan to woo Lady Wishford and at the same time regain her temporal trust so as to have the chance that she is in love once again through his pretended uncle, and all of a sudden he's going to intervene to make her agree that he is going to marry Millamant. So these examples tell us that Mirabel is cynical in the sense of being ironical or sarcastic, and cynical in the sense that he doesn't believe that people are sincere, and that's why he keeps Mrs. Fennel's property once again in trust. At the same time, Mirabel is gracious. He behaves like a gentleman. He behaves in a very cool way that enables him to control actions. Mirabel doesn't harm any good person, any good character. He doesn't cause any harm to Lady Wishford. He doesn't cause any harm to Mrs. Fennel. On the contrary, he appears by the end of the play as a hero, and he saves their reputation. The only two persons that Mirabel manages to stand against are Mr. Fennel and Mrs. Marwood. He stands against Mr. Fennel because Mr. Fennel started blackmailing Lady Wishford. He wanted to receive Lady Wishford's money, his wife's money, and Millamant's money. At the same time, Mirabel stood against Mr. Fennel's relation with Mrs. Marwood after being informed that they enjoy a kind of illicit love. Mirabel is also gracious as he helps Millamant to feel her superiority, especially in the proviso scene. He doesn't make her feel that she is going to lose her individuality or her honor for the sake of her husband. Mirabel is once again gracious as he participates in bringing Mrs. Fennel's respect towards Mr. Fennel to an end. because he enabled her to discover the real character of her husband. Another aspect that is associated with Mirabel is that he is an initiator of action. He usually starts action. He doesn't wait to be another character's response or another character's reaction. At the early beginning of the play, he is the character who arranges the marriage between Arabella, who later on became Mrs. Fainall, and Mr. Fainall. He is the person who pretended love to Lady Wishford so as to be close to Millamant. He is the first person who tries to have a friend in Lady Wishford's house through his arranging the marriage between Waitwell and Fievel. When all these plans are complete, he feels that he controls his action. He is controlling actually the others' actions and reactions. And even with his pretended uncle, after Lady Wishford dismissed him and after Lady Wishford tried to persuade herself and society that he is not the good suitor for Millamant, he managed to have another plan. He devises a plot through using Waitwell to pretend Lady Wishford once again. So he doesn't surrender, he doesn't retreat. If plan A fails, he has plan B and plan C. By the end of the play, we discover that many years ago, he managed to convince Arabella to give her property to him in trust again, because he understands the way of the world. He understands how Fainall may be convinced to get married to Mrs. Fainall just for money, just because he is greedy. He even takes the first step to protect Mrs. Fainall from Mr. Fainall's greedy nature. When Fievel and Mincing gave him information that Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood have illicit love, he is the person who takes action and decides to disclose their secret to Lady Wishford. He helps Lady Wishford and Mrs. Fainall to avoid a social scandal. He is the person who takes the first step towards inviting Millamant to negotiation throughout the proviso scene. Mirabel had tried to talk to Millamant on many occasions, but each time she flies away. Now in the proviso scene, he asks her to settle down, to start talking to him, so as they can reach what we call negotiable love. He is the first person to start this negotiation scene seriously. And before all, don't forget that Mirabel is a character who understands the way of the world. He is experienced enough, especially in marital life, although he is still single. When he talks at the early beginning to Mr. Fainall about his true love to Millamant, he expresses that he loved her with all her faults, and then he continues to say that he loves her because of her faults, for her faults. So he is a person who understands that each one of us has some personal defects. Each one of us has some moral weaknesses. But once he is getting used to his partner's moral weaknesses, there is no problem. He understands how to deal with Millamant because he has her catalog. He is the only person on earth who understands her follies, and he insists that he may get married to her. This is a proof of genuine love. So Mirabel, who started the play as a lover with different aspects of love, ends the play as a genuine lover. He understands what true love means. In the proviso scene, he doesn't react in a bad way to Millamant's list of conditions. On the contrary, he knows how to deal with her, how to persuade her to be dwindled into a wife, because he is also going to be dwindled into a husband. So Mirabel the lover, who started the play using love as a mask for joy and other materialistic leisure, ends the play as a person who is truly motivated by his deep love to Millamant, to rescue Millamant, Lady Wishford, and Mrs. Fainall. He even starts an action that is not understood till the end of the play. No one noticed the reason beyond his acceptance of Millamant's train. Millamant, the young gentle lady who enjoys the accompaniment of her train, the group of followers who appear with her every now and then in public. This train is not welcomed at first by Mirabel, but this kind of not welcoming it or rejection wasn't given a harsh image. On the contrary, in the proviso scene, he puts his own conditions, including that she may not have private talks to a lady, and later on she is not allowed to have private relations with anyone. Mirabel understands that Millamant needs to be loved. At the same time, she is trying to maintain her will and pleasure, the two terms she used, will and pleasure. And he doesn't deny her will, and he doesn't deny that she may have pleasure. But it is will and pleasure from his point of view, not from a social point of view based on what was dominant at that time. If we had a number of lovers, including Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood, Mirabel and Arabella, Mrs. Marwood and her expression that she likes Millamant, Waitwell and Fievel, which turned into marriage, and so on. Among all these examples of love, we have Mirabel starting a new pattern of love based on negotiation. In other words, based on mutual understanding and mutual cooperation. He doesn't enforce Millamant to be married to him. He doesn't enforce her to accept his opinion without questioning it. On the contrary, he behaves like a gentleman who understands the social conditions of that time, as well as the social appreciation of marriage as an icon for the Restoration period. But he doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes committed by other married couples. When Millamant tells him that they are not going to appear in public for the first week after marriage, and then each one will appear with another partner, he doesn't respond at first, but later on he proved practically that he truly agrees with her that they must continue their life based on true love, based on appreciation, based on mutual understanding of each character's moral weaknesses before points of strength. They are going to start a pattern of love that will last for years, not to be a topic for the gossiping among Restoration ladies. So we have Mirabel, the lover, with the different variations of love he has. We have Mirabel, the initiator of actions. We have Mirabel, the cynical, and we have Mirabel, the gracious. These are four qualities or four characteristics that are associated with Congreve's portrayal of the character of Mirabel. Of course, there are lots of examples to illustrate each kind of love. So far, variations of love are concerned, and at the same time, we have more examples based on the text that will talk about Mirabel's kindness, Mirabel's intelligence, Mirabel's wit, and other characteristics. But mainly speaking, we will focus in these four aspects: Mirabel, the lover; Mirabel, the gracious; Mirabel, the initiator of action; and Mirabel, the cynical. I hope that you are going to have a number of examples based on the extracts we read to clarify each characteristic of Mirabel, each of the four characteristics, and at the same time I hope that you are going to write about the character of Mirabel in a good way. I'd like also to give you a kind or a tip or a piece of advice that if you go to the library of our institute, you are going to have 3 books addressing the Restoration comedy of manners in general, as well as William Congreve's The Way of the Wallet in particular. You may have together information about the character of Mirabel, and we are going to discuss what you can add to these 4 qualities when we meet next time. For the time being, I thank you. I hope you have understood, simply speaking, the 4 characteristics of Mirabel, until I meet you next time, it's my pleasure to wish you all the best and thank you.